Both of these teams have the day off, so I wanted to dive into some trade ideas, some talks in regards to what moves could be made, courtesy of an article posted on ESPN.com. Now, Rachel Doerrie published this piece earlier this morning, 6 logical trades that NHL teams should make in January, and I get it, this is more of an editorial piece, but Rachel Doerrie, of course, former Vancouver Canucks employee and just overall hockey-connected person, had some ideas that I thought were interesting. We could realistically make 6 videos about the 6 things that she writes about here, but I wanted to start things off by going over the Edmonton Oilers conversation that is written about. It actually is one of the later trade ideas that are proposed in this piece. There are some very juicy ones at the start of everything after all, and we definitely will continue to respond to these ideas over the next few days. But let's scroll over onto the Edmonton Oilers idea, because what Rachel Doerrie writes about and her trade proposal here revolves around Ivan Provorov of the Columbus Blue Jackets, as he would come over to balance Edmonton's blue line. Provorov is on the final year of his deal and can be acquired on a double retention deal for the Oilers at $2.362 million. Adding the veteran makes sense because of how the Oilers are deploying their defense pairs currently. Now, I will say that's like the first time I've seen an article write about a player in the context of a trade and say, hey, you can get him for only 2-point-something mil against the cap with double retention. Provorov, 27 years old, 6'1", 201, is making $6.75 million a year right now until the end of this season. So if you divide 6.75 by 2 and then you divide it by 2 again, you will get that number. But overall, I mean, kind of an interesting way to phrase it. Let's go out there and continue with this thought. Matthias Ekholm is with Evan Bouchard on the top pairing, and with Darnell Nurse with Brett Kulak on the second pairing, things have been somewhat successful. Slotting in Ivan Provorov to the third pairing with a Troy Stecher or an Emerson on the right side provides the Oilers with more balanced depth heading into the playoffs. Provorov plays every situation, can eat considerable minutes, and can take the matchup load off of some of the other defensemen on the Oilers lineup. He retrieves and moves the puck very well, a skill set that is vital in the playoffs. Columbus is well within its right to ask for a first-round pick, top prospect, or a proven young player in return. While acquiring Provorov won't be cheap, the Oilers came as close as a team could last season and should be all in again this season, while McDavid and Draisaitl are firing on all cylinders. So Doerrie doesn't exactly articulate what a package could look like, just kind of labels out a first-round pick, a top young prospect, or a guy that's relatively young and also an NHL impact player. All good things to hear in practice, right? When you think about the Oilers, honestly, I'm not really too sure if they have many guys that fit that sort of a mold, unless you're talking about Vasili Podkolzin. Like, Podkolzin is the only guy, I feel, in that Oilers lineup that is young enough to consider justifying if you're Columbus. He also has that Russian factor because Marchenko, Chinakhov, right now you have Provorov, and you've got Dmitry Voronkov. Things are Russian in Columbus, not to mention Daniil Tarasov, who is suited up for a few games here and there too. This team has a bunch of Russian guys, and Vasili Podkolzin would fit the age range of some of these other dudes. Voronkov, Chinakhov, Marchenko, these guys are younger players, and it is kind of unfortunate that the trade idea is suggesting Provorov to get traded over to Edmonton, because if you're able to get Podkolzin to Columbus, imagine having a power play of Marchenko, Voronkov, Chinakhov, Provorov, and Pods. I don't want to say that would be the Russian 5 all over again. Obviously, none of those guys are as talented as Sergei Fedorov and Larionov, or actually, I don't know, Marchenko has been very good this year, but that Russian 5, Larionov, Fetisov, Sergei Fedorov, Konstantinov, Kozlov, these guys were great. Shades of the old Red Army Green Unit, which included 2 of those members in Larionov and Fetisov, add on Kasatonov, Krutov, and Sergei Makarov. But anyways, if you wanted to talk young dudes, he's like the only one there in Edmonton, because it's been well documented that the Oilers don't really have too much youth on their roster. They are, I think, quite literally the oldest team in the NHL, or they were at the start of the season. I don't know if things have changed with Podkolzin in the lineup now, but their prospect pool is pretty okay. They do have some guys that I think are interesting. Matthew Savoy is the guy that stands out to me as probably the quote-unquote best prospect the Oilers have in their system. But other than that, there are a few extra names if you really wanted to toss it out there. For Columbus, though, I think they would be looking for a combination of draft picks and value they could bring to their team now, hence the Vasili Podkolzin idea. However, if you talk about the big asset coming back in exchange, Edmonton getting Ivan Provorov would be a pretty big deal. You're not necessarily going to get the best production out of Provorov. Those days are long gone. He was a former 40-point guy with the Philadelphia Flyers all those seasons ago, but he was never able to come close to that ever since. However, for Provorov, he still is a minutes-eating top 4 defenseman. In fact, you could say he gets played like a top 2 some nights. I'm looking at that game against Tampa Bay the other night on Tuesday, where he had 26 minutes time on ice. Provorov is capable of playing that. He has been one of the more relied upon defensemen on the Blue Jackets team. And so if you take one of the top guys in CBJ and you throw him onto what is the third pairing, essentially, in Edmonton, you would be getting a lot of diversity of talent and skill throughout that lineup. And honestly, I do kind of question what it would look like if you had, let's say, Ivan Provorov only playing 15 minutes time on ice in a game. Because you know Darnell Nurse can also play 25-plus minutes if you really push him. If he's on the second pairing and Bouchard and Ekholm are on the first, then I don't know, man. Like, I kind of wonder if you take an absolute tank who always plays games and always plays heavy minutes and you reduce it by about 15-20%, what kind of play are you going to be able to get out of that guy? Will he be a lot better in the limited sample? Will it throw off his entire rhythm? Will he not be able to adjust well and maybe get a little bit pissy, demanding more ice time? Not really too sure. Obviously, this is the kind of problem that playoff teams deal with all the time because, quite frankly, you have teams that are good, acquiring players and assets and stuff that add on to their team, but players that would normally be given bigger roles if they weren't playing on such stacked cup-caliber teams. So, who knows what the situation would be for Provorov? One thing is for sure, though, he is very talented, and so there would be a lot of value for him to bring his experience and his presence onto the Oilers' blue line. Not to mention the fact that I think there would be a direct trade idea that makes sense in this situation, although if you were to do the double salary retained, if you wanted to get a third team involved into that situation, you would probably need to shell out some more draft capital and maybe even more younger dudes if you are Edmonton. But then again, the Oilers were 1 game, 2 goals away from winning the Stanley Cup last year. Do you really care about a prospect that might be very effective for you in 2029 or whatever? Or would you rather say, screw it, let's trade him away now if it gives us the opportunity to get a player like Provorov at $2-point-something million AAV, 75% salary retained? It is kind of interesting, but I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below either way about this idea. Do you think Podkolzin could be the right move for this to go through? I know a lot of Oilers fans have been more positive towards Podkolzin the past little while here. He has started scoring some points. He has been given a little bit more of a role lately, so hopefully that carries over if he's not traded or anything. If he continues growing and progressing as a young player, then that would be totally awesome. Even as a Vancouver Canucks fan, I can go out there and fully believe it when I say that. But thoughts in the comment section either way about Vasili Podkolzin in some sort of a deal over to Columbus for Provorov. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.